It was recently revealed that Rox had a son, and that son was none other than Blackbeard. In the original timeline, Rox died at God Valley. But what if he survived and raised Teach himself? How would the story of One Piece change? And how much stronger would Blackbeard become with Rox by his side? God Valley was an absolute mess. Everything on the island had been destroyed, and there was blood everywhere because of the massive battle that took place. The island was shaken under the weight of monsters like Garp, the Roger Pirates, the Marines and Celestial Dragons, and the infamous Rox Pirates. The Rox Pirates were stronger than anything, with the likes of Edward Newgate, Kaido, Charlotte Linlin, Shiki, and none other than Rox himself. Their ambition was loud, and their blades were louder, like a pack of beasts without a leash. But the Marines and the Roger Pirates, unlikely partners, drove them into the dirt. Betrayal came not from the enemy, but from within. Kaido and Charlotte retreated when they saw that the tables were turning against them, and even Whitebeard had to step back from the fight. In the end, Rox was left alone. He fought like a devil, tearing down trees, cliffs, and ships. He broke mountains with his bare hands and carved through dozens before falling to a storm of blades and bullets. Garp and Roger were proving to be too much for him to handle alone, and in the end, he was left for dead on the destroyed island with a missing arm and leg. The final attack had launched him into the sea, where he was presumed to be dead, but Rox had survived. Despite his critical injuries, he found a half-broken rowboat and drifted into the sea before landing on an island where he could patch himself up. He'd been betrayed by his crew and left for dead. He'd lost his strength and limbs, but his anger was burning inside of him. After recovering, Rox made a raft and sailed once again, and soon ended up in Shadeport, where he intended to start his revenge, using his own son, Marshall D. Teach. His mother had died, and he was left in an orphanage. Even Rox never had the intention of retrieving him, but now things were different. He needed someone to carry on his legacy. As the boy grew, Rox fed him, trained him, and told him stories about the world. Not stories with heroes, only monsters. He told Teach about the Celestial Dragons, about betrayal, about the weak choking on their own fear. He taught him how to hold a sword, how to read maps, how to stay alive, even when everything was broken. Rox told him that the world was his playground and that he would take everything he could. Years passed, and the world had forgotten about the pirate called Rox. The world government had made sure that they would bury his legacy like they thought they did to him, but Rox hadn't forgotten the world. Rox trained Teach with brutal precision. As soon as the boy could walk, he threw young Teach into storms and told him to swim back with damaged arms. He made him fight stray dogs for food. He let him stay out in the cold. It was a good thing the boy had inherited his absurdly sturdy body. He would use that endurance and strengthen it even more. But oddly enough, the boy didn't sleep. It was as if there was something inside of him, but no matter. That simply meant more time for training. He never cried again after he turned 8. By the time he was 12, he could crush bones with his fists. By 14, he fought grown pirates and walked away with nothing but scratches. People in Shadeport stopped looking at him. They moved aside when he passed. Some left the town entirely. Rox watched it all with quiet satisfaction. His boy was becoming something special, but time wasn't kind to Rox. His missing limbs never grew back. His strength, once enough to bend metal with a grip, began to fade. The fire in his lungs got weaker. The coughs came more often. His eyes stayed sharp, and he continued to smile his menacing grin, but his body didn't follow orders like it used to. He didn't fear death, but he wasn't going to kick the bucket before he got revenge. And what could be more ideal for him than eternal youth? The Ope Ope no Mi. A devil fruit with power over life and death. A devil fruit that could give him the eternal youth he needed. At the same time, he'd get Teach the Yami Yami no Mi. It was perfect for the boy and the grim grudge he held inside of him. And so the plan began. At 16, Teach stood taller than most men, and he could easily take on tough pirates. He was also a very keen strategist, which seemed to be another trait he'd inherited from his father. And then the news came that Gold D. Roger had been executed, and it was finally time to begin moving. They'd heard about a doctor who seemed like he could heal any injury or disease. A man with hands so steady, they said he could stitch a beating heart while blindfolded. A wandering surgeon who refused money and healed for free. Rox smiled wide as he realized he'd found what he was looking for. He took Teach, and they headed to the island where the surgeon lived. On the way, Teach took out wandering bandits and some pirates before they finally reached the island and tracked the doctor down to a small village. It was a village with wooden houses, warm fires, and people who grew their own food. Children played in the streets, and the doctor himself lived in the tallest house on the hill. Always open, always busy. Rox went to the doctor and took his family hostage and forced the doctor to give up his own life for theirs to grant him eternal youth. The doctor complied to save his family, but the process was extremely painful, even for Rox. The operation claimed the doctor's life as the price for granting eternal youth. He regrew his arm and leg, his frail skin became taut, and his spine straightened out. The color of his hair returned, and the man stood up after hours, back in his youth and almost the spitting image of Teach. Rox laughed loudly before unleashing a ferocious wave of Conqueror's Haki that made even Teach tremble. In an instant, the townsfolk were knocked unconscious, and Rox went to the nearby forest to test his old strength. It was decimated in a few moments. In the rubble, Rox had a wide grin on his face. His power had returned. Now all he needed was a crew to exact his revenge. Rox stayed on the island for a bit and taught Teach how to properly use the advanced forms of Haki, while he himself got back to using his old strength. Now it was time to form a crew with enough power. The two separated separated and gathered again after a few years had passed. Teach was sent to retrieve the Yami Yami no Mi, while Rox was gathering a crew. The Yami Yami no Mi was extremely hard to find, but Rox had pulled quite a few strings, and soon enough, the devil fruit was tracked. Teach had used the information and was going across the sea looking for it, and soon he found it. He had to kill off a few black market dealers, but it was all in good sport. Teach had finally acquired the power of darkness, the strongest of the Logia-type devil fruits. He soon went back and regrouped with his father, who'd made quite a crew out of a bunch of criminals. But he named Teach the leader. They used the name the world gave Teach when he started tearing apart pirate crews without warning. Blackbeard. The crew treated Blackbeard like the leader. He spoke more, killed more, and took credit for most jobs. Rox let him. He didn't want the world to know yet that he was still alive. Not until the time was right. Across the sea, people began hearing of a new pirate crew called the Blackbeard Pirates, and how they were quickly making a name for themselves due to their brutality and elusiveness. Whitebeard heard of the rumors too, and something tugged in his stomach when he saw the wanted poster. It was the spitting image of Blackbeard. He thought for a second that maybe Rox was still alive, but the man in the poster was young, and it couldn't possibly be Rox, who should have been a much older man by now. He crumpled up the poster and ignored it. He didn't have time to worry about a ragtag group of pirates. Kaido and Big Mom received the news too. Kaido didn't care much for it at all, but Big Mom did send her children to gather more information quietly. She had thrown caution to the wind before, but the poster was too much like Rox, and she had to know if this was some stray son of his that they didn't know about. And so, Rox began his plan. First, he would free one of his former crewmates from prison, Shiki the Golden Lion. Rox and Blackbeard snuck into the prison, and soon they began rampaging through it. The guards never stood a chance. Conqueror's Haki rolled through the upper floors like a pressure wave. Men dropped without being touched. No one could stop the two, and there was chaos with the release of all the prisoners. Level by level, the two descended until they had reached level 6. They tracked down Shiki, who had vanished after his escape from Impel Down years ago. He had gone underground but remained a powerful force, and now Rox had found him. Shiki looked at Rox with confusion before Rox told him that he'd survived and that he had gained eternal youth, and with it, his old power. Shiki had been the only one who tried to save Rox, but even he had been defeated. Now, Rox was calling on him again, and Shiki would answer the call, if only for the fact that this man was at a power level even he couldn't beat. And then, there was his spitting image next to him. Blackbeard exuded power that made it clear he was extremely strong as well. Shiki was freed from his bindings along with the other people on level 6, and Rox and Blackbeard escaped the prison with a power that even the world government would fear. With Shiki, Rox, and Teach, the crew had shape now. The prison break landed the crew a significant bounty, and news spread all over. Shiki called upon his crew, and with his massive floating island ship, they set sail once more to meet an old ally. The Moby Dick floated steadily in calm waters when they saw something approaching. Whitebeard was informed that a massive ship was floating their way, so the captain got on the deck. He recognized the ship, but the Jolly Roger was different. He clenched his Bacento as the ship came closer, and then he saw it. On the deck stood Rox. Whitebeard stepped forward slowly. He saw the man clearly now. His steps, his posture, the weight in his stare. He looked young, but the air around him was old, familiar. He remembered that stare from God Valley, the last moment before it all collapsed. Now it was staring back. Whitebeard looked at Rox, confused. He had seen him bleed out, missing limbs, a corpse that refused to drop. How was he standing here again? Rox recognized Whitebeard's confusion and signaled that they meet on an island nearby. The two ships set sail, and the crews landed on it. Rox stepped forward, and so did Whitebeard. Rox looked stronger than ever. No signs of age, no wounds or missing limbs. Whitebeard felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Whitebeard, older now, moved like a mountain. But Rox, reborn, was as fast as lightning and twice as sharp. Rox spoke about the past, about youth, about how the world had changed, how Roger was dead, Garp was silent, and how the monsters of yesterday pretended to be kings now. And then Rox said something else. He wasn't here to talk. He was here for revenge. Whitebeard said nothing, but his crew stepped forward. And then came a massive blast of Conqueror's Haki from Rox, as if a tidal wave had dropped on the island. The massive wave of pressure exploded outward from Rox. The sky cracked. Birds fell mid-flight. Clouds split in two. Water rippled as if trying to escape the area. Dozens of lower-tier Whitebeard pirates dropped instantly. Eyes rolled back, foaming mouths. Some collapsed before understanding what hit them. Whitebeard stepped forward, his towering frame radiating an overwhelming presence that seemed to bend the very air around him. With a deep breath, he pushed back against the swelling tension with his own formidable Haki, the invisible force rippling outward like an unyielding tide. The battlefield fell silent for a brief heartbeat, the calm before the storm, before the battle finally erupted into chaos. Rox and Whitebeard colliding mid-air with a thunderous impact. Whitebeard swung his massive Naginata in a wide, devastating arc, slicing through the air and creating a shockwave so powerful it split the sea itself, sending waves crashing violently against the distant shores. Rox caught the gleaming edge with one hand, muscles straining as he twisted the force upward, redirecting the deadly blade into the swirling clouds above. The sky darkened unnaturally as the atmosphere twisted and churned, lightning crackling ominously among the stormy heavens. Rox launched a ferocious counterattack, unleashing a wild barrage of punches coated thickly in Conqueror's Haki. Each strike thundered through the air like rolling howling cannon fire. One brutal blow connected squarely against Whitebeard's broad chest, sending the massive pirate crashing backward through his own crew with the force of a crashing shipwreck. Whitebeard coughed up a spray of blood, but he refused to yield, his iron will roaring louder than any wound. He slammed his weapon into the ground with bone-shaking power, the earth fracturing and trembling beneath him as he charged toward rocks. Around him, the very sea buckled in response, massive tremors rippling outward that sent a towering column of seawater spiraling high into the air like a watery beacon of war. Rocks vanished in an instant, only to reappear with lethal precision, delivering a powerful kick to Whitebeard's back. The elder pirate responded with a cataclysmic quake that radiated from his entire body, ripping the battlefield apart and swallowing whole chunks of earth and stone. Meanwhile, on another part of the battlefield, Blackbeard squared off against Marco in a furious clash of elements, flames against darkness. Marco's phoenix form blazed with brilliant blue fire, the ethereal flames trailing like wings of pure energy. His razor-sharp talons descended swiftly, tearing through the earth where Blackbeard had stood mere moments before. But Blackbeard was no easy target. With a cruel grin, he summoned a pool of impenetrable darkness beneath Marco's feet. The shadows writhed and coiled like living tendrils, yanking the pirate commander downward with the merciless pull of the Yami Yami no Mi. Marco was slammed harshly into the ground, his majestic wings ensnared and bound in a suffocating web of shadow. Though weakened and broken by Blackbeard's power, Marco's crewmates rushed in, throwing themselves between the two to push Blackbeard back and free the trapped phoenix. Nearby, Shiki hovered just above the ground, surrounded by a swirling halo of razor-sharp blades that reflected the fiery light of the chaos around them. His eerie laughter echoed across the battlefield as Vista and Jozu charged him together, their faces set with grim determination. Jozu's immense strength cracked the ground beneath his swinging fist, but Shiki simply rose higher, the deadly blades circling faster as he plucked a massive half-ton boulder from the earth. With a casual flick, he dropped the crushing weight onto Jozu's back, the impact echoing like thunder. Though Jozu pushed the boulder off, Shiki wasn't done. He hurled the boulder like a missile, sending Jozu hurtling into the roaring sea. Vista rushed forward next, their swords clashing in a furious blur of steel and sparks. The very ground beneath them tore open as Shiki manipulated the environment itself, turning earth and rock into lethal weapons that sliced through the battlefield. Hours stretched on in a relentless melee as the crew of criminals fought desperately against Whitebeard's pirates, but the tide was turning. Slowly and inevitably, Whitebeard's crew found themselves overwhelmed. Marco fought valiantly to hold Blackbeard back, blasting him with searing blue flames, but the dark power around Blackbeard seemed to absorb every attack. The darkness thickened, swirling into a ravenous vortex that devoured debris, weapons, and even nearby pirates, pulling them into its inescapable maw. Blackbeard's laughter rang out, a cold, triumphant sound as he fed the swirling shadows. Desperate, Marco tried to gain altitude, seeking to regroup from above, but Blackbeard's grasp was swift and merciless. Clamping his hand around Marco's leg mid-flight, Blackbeard dragged him down mercilessly, delivering a barrage of crushing punches that drove the phoenix to the ground. One strike, two strikes, three devastating blows, each heavier than the last. Marco struggled to break free, but his strength ebbed away, and soon he lay broken, a bloody ruin on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Shiki had already taken down Jozu and Vista, and many of the Whitebeard pirates were falling one by one. Whitebeard himself found his focus slipping, distracted by the relentless onslaught, but rocks kept him locked away from intervening in the other fights. Whitebeard's arms trembled with exhaustion, though he had landed massive blows that left lasting scars. Yet Rocks was younger, faster, and far more ruthless. His eyes never blinked, and his muscles never showed fatigue. Each punch he threw carried a crushing weight, enough to make the very air scream in agony. As Whitebeard took in the destruction ravaging the battlefield around him, the grim realization dawned that this war must end now, even if it meant the total destruction of the island beneath their feet. Whitebeard clenched his fists, the air around his hands cracking and shattering like glass. But suddenly, all sensation vanished. Darkness surged, swallowing the light and the earth itself. Blackbeard was there. With a merciless hand, Blackbeard pressed against Whitebeard's back, nullifying the power of his devil fruit in an instant. Seizing the momentary advantage, Rocks lunged forward and drove his fist into Whitebeard's chest, his strike coated in fierce conqueror's hockey that shattered ribs, burst blood vessels, and tore through flesh and bone alike. Whitebeard swung wildly in retaliation, knocking both attackers back, but blood poured from his mouth as he staggered. He struggled to fight back, but tendrils of darkness pierced through his body, sapping his strength. Blackbeard stepped forward without hesitation, delivering the final devastating blow. In that instant, he stole Whitebeard's devil fruit power, inheriting the terrifying might of the Gura Gura no Mi, the power of the strongest man in the world. The rest of the Whitebeard pirates retreated. Some stayed back, but they were killed, and Rocks laughed loudly as the battlefield became a torn and bloody mess. He'd gotten revenge on one of his former crewmates. Now it was time for the rest. Shiki himself felt fear as he saw Rocks at the prime of his power, but there was no stopping this now. News spread far and wide that an emperor of the sea, deemed the strongest man, had fallen to the Blackbeard pirates. In Wano, thunder rolled through Onigashima before the storm arrived. It hadn't been long since he'd taken control of Wano, and now there was someone out there there killing emperors? It couldn't be. Whitebeard was strong. If he could fall, so could anyone. And now there were whispers that Rox was alive. Kaido remembered those eyes, that voice, that pressure that made the ground afraid to hold him. But he didn't believe it until now. On Whole Cake Island, Big Mom sat with a cold stare as her children gave her the news. It was clear that the man was alive. She had no idea how, but she wasn't going to let her power and land be broken up. She knew that Rox would come after her if he was truly alive, and she wasn't going to just let things wash over. She summoned her children to prepare for war and sent word to Kaido. The two quickly made arrangements, and she left her island with her strongest children and headed to Wano. Kaido and Big Mom created their alliance and gathered their forces. Meanwhile, the Blackbeard pirates were making their way toward Wano. Blackbeard had gotten a good handle on the power of the Gura Gura no Mi after training with it. He held the power of earthquakes now, and his darkness could swallow and nullify everything else. And yet, it wasn't enough for him. He stared at Rox from afar. The father who had raised him and shaped him and who had destroyed his childhood and instilled in him a greed for power unlike anything else. Teach didn't see Rox as a father anymore. Instead, he saw a throne that was occupied. He grinned as he cooked up a plan. As the floating island ship approached Wano, Rox stood tall at the bow with his coat fluttering. Shiki sharpened his blades, and the rest of the crew sailed below them. It was a vast number that they had acquired, a force capable of toppling countries. In Marineford, the meeting room stayed quiet long after the report was read. Admirals didn't speak much as Sengoku analyzed the data. They'd caught wind of the Blackbeard pirates' movements, and Blackbeard himself was already recognized as an emperor. The Marines didn't believe the rumors that Rox was alive either, but this situation fit them perfectly. They'd simply sit back and let the pirates take themselves out. The ship finally reached the shore of Wano. Kaido, Big Mom, and the rest of their crews were waiting deeper in the country, waiting for the Blackbeard pirates with their strongest forces surrounding them. And in an instant, the battle began. The Blackbeard pirates ripped through villages, plundering, looting, and killing as they went toward the inner areas. They soon reached the flower capital with Shiki floating above. King was the first to attack. He launched forward with black wings and fire on his back, leaving a fiery trail as he cut through the air. Their blades clashed midair, scattering sparks in every direction. King's attacks cut through Shiki's floating boulders, while Shiki grinned and redirected the debris, turning a crumbling pagoda into a rain of jagged spears. King weaved through it all, flames swirling around him, and struck Shiki with a slash that connected with Shiki's own blades. He caught King with a floating iron beam and slammed him through a tower, then sent the whole tower flying after him. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Blackbeard moved like a living storm. Darkness and quakes rippled with every step. Katakuri came first, his observation haki flaring. He dodged the first quake punch, twisted his body, and slammed a mochi fist into Blackbeard's side. It stuck for a second, but then the darkness pulled it apart. Katakuri flipped back, firing hardened mochi bullets. Blackbeard grunted and raised his hand, sucking the bullets into a swirling black hole midair. Then came Cracker and Smoothie, attacking from both flanks. Cracker's blades clashed against the quake pulses, splintering the ground, while Smoothie tried to wring out Blackbeard's water from the air itself. But the moment Blackbeard touched the ground, everything exploded. The street split in two. Cracker was flung backward into a stone wall. Smoothie tried to block the shockwave, but her blade cracked and her armor shattered. Katakuri rushed in again, future sight blurring his movements, but Blackbeard pulled him in with Black Vortex, grabbed his face, and slammed him into the ground so hard the entire block collapsed. The earth buckled as quakes ran through the ground. Blackbeard went toward the Skull Dome. Atop the Skull Dome, the true war began. Kaido, in full hybrid form, spun his Kanabo in circles, releasing wind blasts. Big Mom, surrounded by Prometheus and Napoleon, unleashed bolts of living lightning. And in the middle of the two, Rox was fighting like a madman. His body already bore gashes, but his posture never wavered. Conqueror's haki burst from him like a pressure cannon as he infused each attack with it. The Blackbeard pirates and the Alliance were duking it out on the battlefield while monsters fought above. Blackbeard himself had neared the Skull Dome, where he simply began watching as Rox fought Kaido and Big Mom. Rox took Kaido's thunderous swing and responded with a palm strike that sent the Emperor flying through the castle wall. Big Mom attacked from behind with sword crackling, but Rox turned just in time to grab the blade and punch her hard in the gut. He pushed back, sending her crashing through a tower, but the fight wasn't clean. Kaido came again, slamming a Thunder Bagua into Rox's side. The blow dented his ribs. Big Mom followed with a massive lightning strike that seemed to split the sky in half. Rox roared as he leapt forward, haki bursting like a bomb and struck the ground. A shockwave erupted that flattened the upper dome. Rox's knuckles bled, but he was enjoying this fight immensely. Kaido had transformed into a dragon and was showering the area with blasts, while Big Mom continued her onslaught. Both of them were heaving at this point, and it looked like they were evenly matched with Rox. The fight continued for quite some time before Rox brought Kaido to the ground by jumping and grabbing his tail before throwing him down. Kaido rose again, severely wounded, but behind him now stood Blackbeard. He raised his Quake Fist and smashed Kaido's leg out from under him. Kaido staggered, turning to fight when darkness erupted from the ground, wrapping his limbs, binding him mid-roar. Blackbeard moved in fast, slammed his hand into Kaido's chest, and activated a black hole in the place where Rox had made a deep gash previously. Kaido's skin cracked, and his mouth opened in agony. His heart had been ripped out. Kaido collapsed, limp, and then Blackbeard's body began to grow as he laughed loudly. His skin thickened as his form twisted, and Suddenly, standing beside Rox was a massive black-scaled dragon with glowing eyes. Blackbeard had taken Kaido's devil fruit. Big Mom, bloodied and furious, charged again with a blast of pure lightning, riding Zeus like a chariot. Rox didn't dodge, but instead caught the lightning in his bare hands. It burned through his palms, but he redirected it through his own conqueror's hockey-infused punch. He launched himself forward. Their fists collided in the sky, and a moment later, Big Mom crashed to the ground with a crater beneath her. Wano was burning, and 2 Yonko were now dead. Rox stood on the skull dome, breathing heavily with wounds but victorious. His body, cursed and warped by the Yami Yami no Mi, somehow survived all 3 powers, something no other human could do. Blackbeard, now with the power of darkness, the form of a dragon, and earthquakes at his command, stood behind him, and he grinned wide. Rox turned around as he felt the bloodlust emanating from none other than his own son. Blackbeard reduced his size to a hybrid form and stretched his fingers. He felt the power coursing through him. Rox looked at Blackbeard with piercing eyes that had seen countless battles and untold betrayals, his voice low but sharp as he asked what exactly the younger man was planning. Blackbeard's gaze was steady, unflinching, a dangerous calm beneath a storm of ambition swirling inside him. He declared plainly that there could only be one ruler of the world, and at this point in time, a relic of the past like Rox was no longer necessary to stand in his way. Though Rox had been the one to raise Blackbeard, nurture him from a boy into a force feared by many, he had unknowingly fostered a fire within Blackbeard that rivaled even his own legendary hunger for power. Rox had once been consumed by his thirst for vengeance, a path that had clouded his original goal of world domination. But Blackbeard was wiser in this regard. He understood that to become the ultimate king, the first step was to overthrow the man who had forged him. And what better moment to strike than when that man was already drained and bloodied from fighting not one, but 2 of the mightiest emperors. Blackbeard stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the cracked ground as Rox's aura flared wildly, a storm of raw conqueror's hockey radiating from him. Though grievously wounded, Rox refused to show weakness. His pride and will to fight burned brighter than ever. Their clash erupted violently, the earth beneath them groaning and fracturing as power met power. Blackbeard soared forward, twisting midair as he transformed into a maelstrom of shadow, scale, and devastating shockwaves. Rox met his charge head-on, delivering a punch infused with pure conqueror's hockey, a strike so fierce it shattered the mountain ridge behind them in a thunderous explosion of stone and dust. The war between them raged on, a cataclysm unfolding across the shattered remnants of Wano's once proud landscape. Blackbeard was thrown harshly into the side of the mountain, the impact sending cascades of rock and dirt tumbling down the cliff face. He shook off the debris without hesitation, then slammed his palm onto the ground, unleashing a titanic shockwave that rippled outward in a mile-wide radius, pulverizing everything in its path. Rox charged through the devastation, weaving nimbly through the quake's aftermath with terrifying speed. He landed a heavy, hockey-coated punch squarely into Blackbeard's chest, the force ripping through the thick scales and sending a spray of dark blood into the air. A furious roar escaped Blackbeard's lips as he spun, tail wrapped in creeping shadows, slamming Rox violently against a cliffside. The collision carved a crater so massive it could have housed a fortress within its depths. Rox staggered from the impact, his clothes torn ragged, eyes blazing with relentless fury. The battle dragged on, exhausting both combatants despite Rox's heavy injuries. With a fierce cry, Rox launched himself skyward, summoning all his remaining strength. From above, he brought down a devastating elbow, pulsating with Conqueror's hockey, aimed directly at Blackbeard's shoulder. The blow cracked bone and muscle, sending thick black mist billowing from the wound. Ancient legends whispered in forgotten texts spoke of the Yami Yami no Mi's unique ability to absorb far more than light or pain. Some even claimed it could consume time itself. Yet Blackbeard merely smiled through the pain, his eyes gleaming with dark intent. He unleashed an overwhelming wave of darkness, expanding in all directions, devouring matter, light, and even sound, as if the very essence of the world was being swallowed whole. Rox was dragged helplessly into the consuming void. His own hockey flared in resistance, clashing violently with the encroaching darkness, sending shockwaves rippling through the air and shaking the island to its core. Blackbeard raised his other hand, slamming the atmosphere with the devastating power of the Gura Gura no Mi. The resulting shockwave tore through the sky, hitting Rox midair with a force that folded space itself, crashing him down like a blazing meteorite. The earth beneath them split open, forming a chasm deeper and wider than any natural canyon ever witnessed in Wano's history. Yet, even in such devastation, Rox refused to yield. He breathed heavily, his left arm hanging useless at his side, crimson trickling down his battered face. His spirit, unbroken and burning brighter than ever, drove him forward. His fists ignited with glowing Conqueror's hockey, swirling around him like jagged bolts of black lightning. With a roar, he struck Blackbeard dead center. The monstrous dragon form shattered, and Blackbeard coughed up blood, staggered but unbroken, just as Rox prepared to deliver another crushing blow. Thick tendrils of black darkness erupted from Blackbeard's body, snaking around Rox and dragging him backward. He faltered, realizing far too late what was happening. Blackbeard was stealing his youth, siphoning away his strength with insidious, relentless force. Blackbeard closed in, placing a palm over Rox's chest. A thin pulse of darkness spread outward like rippling venom, and Rock screamed, agony searing through his body. Mid-strike, his muscles seized. His body froze as the life force drained from him. For the first time since God Valley, the Titan faltered, weakened beneath the crushing weight of Blackbeard's power. Without hesitation, Blackbeard's other fist struck with brutal precision, punching deep into Rox's chest. Vibrations radiated through his battered frame as the dragon-like arm pierced through his defenses. Slowly, the fierce light that had blazed within Rox's eyes began to dim. His body slumped, his conqueror's haki dissipating like smoke caught on the wind. The man who had once shaken the very foundations of the world was no more. In his place stood his own bloodline, his son, now wielding power unlike anything the world had ever seen. The remaining crew members, battered but alive, gathered silently around as Shiki led them toward the Skull Dome. Their eyes fell upon Rox's fallen form, then shifted to Blackbeard, who radiated an overwhelming aura of darkness and conquest. They bowed to their new king of darkness. Channel memberships are now officially open. There will be 2 tiers available, each with their own perks and rewards. If you'd like to support the channel and gain access to sneak peeks, video requests, and much more, click the join button below the video. Make sure to subscribe and smash the like button for more One Piece videos.